It's our anniversary, Minjun. Haewon reaches for the alpha he loves, only to find his hand cold and his bond mark lifeless. Within minutes, the specially prepared nest is abandoned, and the meal is burning in the oven as Minjun cold-bloodedly announces he is leaving for New York alone. This is the moment forever shattered, leaving Haewon to pick up the pieces of a bond he thought would last their lifetime. But as he stands in the wreckage of their marriage, a hidden truth is already growing, one that will change both their lives 4 years later. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and tell me where you're watching from. 3 days after Minjun left, Haewon's body began to rebel. It started with the scent. His own pheromones, usually a soft blend of vanilla and rain, turned acrid and sharp, the unmistakable smell of a distressed omega whose alpha had severed contact. The bond mark on his neck, Minjun's claiming bite that had once pulsed with warmth, now throbbed with a cold, phantom ache that made him gasp at random moments throughout the day. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. His hands trembled as he picked up his phone for the 47th time, scrolling to Minjun's contact with shaking fingers. Please, just tell me why. He pressed send and watched the message turn blue. Delivered. Not blocked then. Just ignored. The silence was somehow worse than rejection. Haewon's best friend, Jiho, found him on the 4th day, curled in the nest he'd built for their anniversary. The one Minjun had walked past without a second glance. The pillows still carried the fading scent of his alpha, and Haewon clutched them like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. He said the bond was fading, Haewon whispered, his voice raw. But I can still feel it, Jiho. It's right here. He pressed his palm against his chest, where the invisible thread connecting him to Minjun pulled taut and painful. If it was fading for him, why does it feel like it's killing me? Jiho had no answers. Only tissues and the kind of silence that said, I don't know how to fix this. By the end of the first week, Haewon forced himself to function. He returned to his job at the marketing firm, wore scent patches to hide his distress, and perfected the art of smiling when his supervisor asked if he was all right. He tried calling Minjun's office. The secretary said Mr. Kong was in New York on extended business and wasn't taking personal calls. He tried Minjun's parents. His father-in-law's assistant said the family had no comment on private marital matters. He tried Minjun's email. It bounced back. This address is no longer monitored. Every attempt hit a wall. Every door slammed shut. It was as if Minjun had erased him with surgical precision, cutting out 4 years of marriage, 2 years of dating, and a bond that was supposed to last forever. Haewon started to wonder if he'd imagined it all. 2 weeks after the anniversary that destroyed everything, Haewon woke up and ran to the bathroom, his stomach heaving violently. He blamed it on the bond sickness. Omegas whose alphas abandoned them often suffered physical symptoms. Nausea, dizziness, fatigue. But when it happened again the next morning, and the morning after that, a cold dread settled in his chest. No, it couldn't be. He bought the test on his lunch break, hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it twice. He took it in the bathroom of a coffee shop 3 blocks from his office because he couldn't bear to do it at home, in the apartment that still smelled like Minjun's cologne. 2 lines, bold and unmistakable. Haewon stared at the stick until his vision blurred, until the world narrowed to those 2 pink lines that meant everything had just become infinitely more complicated. 6 weeks, the doctor confirmed the next day. Congratulations, she said warmly, completely missing the way Haewon's face had gone sheet white. Do you want to call your alpha? Some like to be present for the first ultrasound. He's traveling, Haewon managed. For work. The doctor smiled. Well, make sure he sees these. She handed him grainy printouts that showed a tiny blob, barely visible, barely real, but undeniably alive. Haewon sat in his car in the clinic parking lot for an hour, the ultrasound photos trembling in his hands. He picked up his phone, opened his messages to Minjun. The previous 47 texts stared back at him, all unread, all unanswered. I'm pregnant. He typed it, deleted it, typed it again. We're going to have a baby. Delete. You left me, but you left something behind. Delete. 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 His finger hovered over the call button. Maybe if Minjun heard his voice. Maybe if he explained. Maybe. A notification lit up his screen. A news alert. Kong Minjun, CEO of Kong Enterprises, spotted at exclusive Alpha Omega matching gala in Manhattan. Sources say the family is actively seeking a suitable match for the eligible bachelor. The photo showed Minjun in a tailored suit, his mother beside him, introducing him to a beautiful Omega in a designer gown. He was smiling. Not the hollow smile Haewon had seen on their anniversary, but something approaching genuine warmth. Eligible bachelor. As if Haewon had never existed. As if their bond mark was a tattoo Minjun could simply laser away. Haewon's phone slipped from his numb fingers. The choice crystallized in that moment, brutal and clear. He could chase a man who had already moved on, who had blocked every avenue of contact, who was being paraded in front of replacement Omegas like Haewon was already forgotten. He could beg for scraps from someone who'd thrown him away. Or he could choose the tiny life growing inside him. The one thing Minjun had left behind that couldn't ghost him, couldn't block him, couldn't pretend he didn't exist. That night, Haewon sat in his half-empty apartment. Minjun had taken his things while Haewon was at work, hadn't even left a note, and placed his hand on his still flat stomach. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered to the emptiness. His voice cracked. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The bond mark pulsed, that phantom ache that never quite faded. But beneath his palm, there was something else. Something fragile and new and entirely dependent on him. Haewon closed his eyes, took a breath that hurt his chest. "I'll be enough for both of us," he promised the child who couldn't hear him yet. "I don't know how, but I will be. You'll never feel invisible. You'll never be abandoned." His phone buzzed. Another message to Minjun, still unread. Haewon turned it off. Some doors, once closed, were meant to stay that way. And some promises were made to be kept, even if the person who'd broken them would never know the cost. The complications started at 10 weeks. Haewon woke to cramping so severe he couldn't stand upright. He called in sick to work for the third time that month, his supervisor's patience wearing thin in her clipped response. In the bathroom, he checked for bleeding with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, relief flooding him when there was none. But the pain persisted, radiating from his abdomen in waves that left him breathless. The emergency Omega clinic was sterile and cold. A nurse with kind eyes took his vitals while he sat alone on the examination table, trying not to think about how Minjun should be here, pacing the hallway, demanding to see him immediately like alphas did in movies. "Your blood pressure is elevated," the doctor said, frowning at her tablet. "And your hormone levels are erratic. Are you experiencing significant stress?" Haewon almost laughed. Stress. What a quaint, inadequate word for the way his life had imploded. "My alpha, we're separated," he managed. The doctor's expression shifted to something like pity. "I see. Bond separation during pregnancy can be dangerous for both you and the baby. The Omega body expects alpha pheromones to help regulate hormones. Without that," she trailed off delicately. "Is there any way to contact him? Even limited exposure could help stabilize your condition." Haewon stared at the ultrasound screen, where his baby's heartbeat flickered like a tiny star. "I've tried." But he would try again. He had to. That night, Haewon sat at his laptop and crafted an email. Not to Minjun's personal address, that had been bouncing back for weeks, but to his corporate account at Kong Enterprises. Surely they couldn't block that. It was a business email, monitored by assistants, routed through servers that required paper trails. Subject: urgent medical emergency. "Minjun, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you've made that abundantly clear. But this isn't about us anymore. I'm pregnant. 10 weeks. There are complications, and the doctor says I need." He stopped. Read it back. Hated how desperate it sounded. Deleted everything after pregnant, and tried again. "I'm pregnant with your child. I have the right to inform you of this, and you have the right to decide what role, if any, you want to play. But I need you to acknowledge this message. I need to know you received it. Please." Haewon. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then sat frozen, watching his inbox like it might spontaneously generate a response through sheer force of will. 3 hours later, a reply arrived. His heart leaped, then shattered. "Delivery failure. This mailbox is no longer monitored. For business inquiries, please contact." Haewon slammed his laptop shut so hard the screen cracked at the corner. He tried calling Minjun's mother next, a woman who had never particularly liked him. Omega from a middle-class family, no connections, no pedigree, but who might at least pass along a message about her grandchild. The housekeeper answered. "The Kong family is not accepting calls regarding Mr. Minjun's personal affairs. Please do not call again." Click. Haewon tried Minjun's brother, his college roommate, his executive assistant, every single person in Minjun's orbit that he could remember. Blocked. Unavailable. No longer at this number. It was systematic. Deliberate. Someone had scorched the earth between them, erasing every possible point of contact with military precision. Jiho found him 3 days later, surrounded by printed emails, call logs, and crumpled tissues. "You need to stop," his friend said gently, taking the phone from Haewon's white-knuckled grip. "You're making yourself sick." "He has a right to know," Haewon whispered. "Even if he doesn't want me, he has a right to know about the baby." "Does he, though?" Jiho's voice was harder than usual. "A right implies responsibility. What has he done to earn that?" Haewon had no answer. That weekend, Jiho brought over takeout and his tablet, ostensibly to watch a movie and distract Haewon from his spiraling thoughts. But halfway through, he scrolled through social media, and his face went carefully blank. "What?" Haewon asked. "Nothing." "Jiho." His friend sighed and turned the screen around. The headline screamed in bold letters. Kong Dynasty continues. Minjun Kong courts Omega Elite at Manhattan Gala. There were photos. So many photos. Minjun in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Haewon's monthly rent, standing beside his mother, the formidable matriarch of the Kong family, dripping in diamonds and disapproval. She was introducing him to a stunning Omega in a gown that shimmered like liquid gold, her hand possessively on her son's arm. The caption identified her. Song Eugene, daughter of Song Industries CEO, graduate of Yale, philanthropist. Everything Haewon wasn't. There were more photos. Minjun laughing at something Eugene said. Minjun's mother beaming with approval. Minjun accepting a champagne flute, looking relaxed and present in a way he hadn't looked at their anniversary dinner. Another photo showed him with a different Omega. Park Ji-woo, the article said, former model, now running her family's hotel empire. And another. Kim Seo-yeon, violinist, descended from old money. The article gushed about how the eligible alpha is finally taking his personal life seriously, and how sources close to the family confirm they're actively seeking a suitable match for the Kong heir. Eligible alpha. Suitable match. As if Haewon's Bond mark had been a rough draft they'd finally decided to edit out. "He's moved on," Jiho said quietly. "Haewon, I'm sorry, but he's moved on." Haewon couldn't breathe. The room tilted sideways, and he gripped the couch cushion to keep from falling. 11 weeks pregnant with this man's child, his body falling apart from Bond separation, and Minjun was drinking champagne with Omegas whose last names appeared in financial magazines. His phone buzzed. For one desperate, irrational second, he thought. But no, it was just his doctor's office, confirming his appointment for next week's ultrasound. The one where they'd check if the baby was developing properly despite his failing body. The one Minjun would never attend. "I'm erased," Haewon said, his voice hollow. "He didn't just leave me. He erased me." Jiho pulled him close, and Haewon finally let himself break. He sobbed into his friend's shoulder, ugly and raw, mourning not just the man who'd abandoned him but the fantasy he'd been clinging to. That Minjun would answer, would come back, would at least care enough to acknowledge the life they'd created. That fantasy died in a Manhattan ballroom, photographed in high definition for the world to see. When Haewon finally pulled himself together, his eyes were swollen and his throat ached, but something had crystallized in his chest. Something cold and hard and final. "I'm done chasing him," he said. Jiho studied his face. "You mean it?" Haewon looked down at his stomach, where his baby was growing despite everything. Despite the stress, the Bond sickness, the alpha who'd chosen Park Avenue galas over the family he'd left behind. "He made his choice," Haewon said. "Now I'll make mine." He blocked Minjun's number. Deleted every email. Removed every photo from his cloud storage. If Minjun wanted to pretend Haewon didn't exist, fine. Two could play that game. And when this baby was born, they would build a life so full, so complete, that Minjun's absence would be nothing more than a footnote in their story. The contraction started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in February, exactly 8 months after Minjun had walked out the door. Haewon was alone in his apartment. He downsized after realizing he couldn't afford the place he and Minjun had shared, when his water broke. He called Jiho with shaking hands, timing contractions with an app on his phone while he gathered the hospital bag he'd packed weeks ago. No alpha to carry it for him. No mate to hold his hand and tell him everything would be okay. Just him and the baby who'd been fighting to survive despite everything. "I'm 10 minutes away," Jiho said, breathless on the other end. "Just breathe. You've got this." Haewon wasn't sure he did. But the baby wasn't asking permission. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. A nurse helped him into a gown while Jiho filled out paperwork, lying smoothly when asked about the alpha's whereabouts. Business trip overseas. Unavoidable. Better than the truth. He doesn't know and wouldn't care if he did. Labor was brutal. 17 hours of pain that rewrote Haewon's understanding of suffering. Nurses cycling through shifts while he gripped Jiho's hand hard enough to leave bruises. The omega biology that should have made this easier. The pheromones an alpha partner would provide, the instinctive comfort of a bonded mate, was conspicuously absent. His body labored alone, just like he'd done everything else for the past 8 months. One more push, the doctor urged. Come on, you're almost there. Haewon bore down with everything he had left, and suddenly the pressure released. A thin, furious wail filled the room. It's a girl, the nurse announced, placing a squirming, blood-streaked bundle on his chest. Haewon looked down at his daughter and forgot how to breathe. She was perfect. Impossibly tiny, with a cap of dark hair and skin that glowed under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes squeezed shut as she cried, fists waving in indignation at being thrust into this cold, bright world. Hi, Haewon whispered, his voice breaking. Hi, baby. He choked on the word. I'm here. She calmed at his voice, at the scent of the omega who'd carried her. And when she finally opened her eyes, Haewon's heart stopped. Gray. Distinctive, piercing gray. The exact shade of Minjun's eyes, the ones Haewon used to trace in the dark, memorizing every fleck of silver. His daughter would carry her father in her gaze for the rest of her life, a daily reminder of the alpha who'd chosen champagne galas over this moment. What's her name? Jiho asked softly, tears streaming down his face. Haewon had agonized over it for months. He'd considered names from his own family, neutral names that carried no weight, anything that wouldn't tie her to the Kong legacy. But looking at her now, at the miracle she represented, survival against impossible odds, only one name felt right. Suah, he said. It means beautiful beginning. Because that's what she was. The beginning of everything that came next. Jiho squeezed his shoulder. It's perfect. That night, alone in his hospital room with Suah sleeping in the bassinet beside him, Haewon made a vow. He spoke it out loud so the universe would hear, so he could never take it back. You will never feel abandoned, he whispered, his finger tracing her impossibly small hand. You will never wonder if you're enough. You will never chase someone who doesn't see your worth. His voice cracked. I will love you enough for 2 parents. I will build you a life so full that his absence won't leave a hole. I promise. Suah's fingers curled around his, her grip surprisingly strong. Haewon took it as acceptance. 3 months later, Haewon stood in the arrivals terminal of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, Suah strapped to his chest in a carrier, 2 suitcases containing everything they owned at his feet. Seoul had too many memories. Too many places where he might glimpse someone who looked like Minjun and feel that traitorous hope spike in his chest. He needed distance. A fresh start. Somewhere his daughter could grow up without the shadow of the Kong family looming over them. Seattle had rain and tech startups and an Omega entrepreneurship accelerator that had accepted his application. It had possibility. The accelerator program was housed in a converted warehouse in Capitol Hill, all exposed brick and standing desks and whiteboards covered in scrawled business models. Haewon was the only participant with a baby, and he felt the weight of judgment in some of the other founders' eyes. Single Omega parent, no alpha support, trying to build a company while literally breastfeeding during pitch practice. He ignored them and focused on the mentors who saw potential instead of liability. Tell me about your idea, his assigned advisor said during their first meeting. She was a beta in her 50s who'd built and sold 3 companies, and she didn't even blink when Suah started fussing. Haewon adjusted the carrier and launched into his pitch. It's called Bond Tech Solutions, a platform that connects single parents, Omega, Beta, Alpha, doesn't matter, with thoroughly vetted background check childcare providers. Real-time availability, transparent pricing, reviews from verified users. What's your competitive advantage? Trust, Haewon said simply. I built this because I needed it. Every childcare option I found was either prohibitively expensive or required references from employers and partners I don't have. The platform assumes a traditional family structure. Mine doesn't. His advisor leaned back, studying him. How many users like you are out there? 32% of Omega parents are raising children without alpha partners. That's millions of people who need what I'm building. Show me your prototype. Haewon did. He'd coded it himself over 3 months of sleepless nights, writing functions while Suah dozed against his chest, debugging during her 2 a.m. feedings, designing the user interface during precious naptime hours. It wasn't polished, but it worked. His advisor smiled. Let's get you funded. The next 6 months blurred together in a haze of code, coffee, and diapers. Haewon learned to function on 4 hours of sleep. He learned to pitch investors while wearing spit-up on his shoulder. He learned to write algorithms with one hand while bouncing a teething baby with the other. Suwa became the unofficial mascot of the accelerator. She slept through pitch competitions, gurgled happily during user testing sessions, and charmed every venture capitalist who visited despite Haewon's anxiety that bringing a baby to business meetings was professional suicide. "She's your why," one investor told him after writing a check. "Never apologize for that." Bondtech launched on Suwa's first birthday. Haewon pressed deploy on his laptop at 11:58 p.m., then scooped up his daughter, who was somehow still awake, gray eyes bright with curiosity, and spun her around their tiny apartment. "We did it," he whispered into her hair. "You and me, baby girl. We built something real." Within the first week, they had 500 signups. Within the first month, 5,000. Parents desperate for the exact solution Haewon had created from necessity and heartbreak. The platform grew. So did Suwa. She took her first steps in the Bondtech office, said her first word, "Mama," during a board meeting, drew her first picture on the back of a term sheet. And every milestone, every victory, every line of code that brought them closer to success, Haewon thought, "This is what you missed. This is what you chose to walk away from." He didn't say it out loud. Didn't need to. Minjun's absence spoke volumes on its own. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and tell me where you're watching from. The Forbes photographer wanted Haewon to look powerful but approachable for the 30 Under 30 feature shoot. "Can you lean against the desk? Cross your arms?" "Yes, like that." The photographer circled him like a predator. "Now soften your expression. You're revolutionizing childcare, not hostile takeovers." Haewon complied, years of practice helping him slide into the polished CEO persona he'd perfected. Tailored blazer, confident posture, the kind of smile that said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." Nothing like the shattered Omega who'd arrived in Seattle 4 years ago with a newborn and 2 suitcases. That version of him had been buried under investor pitches, product launches, and the relentless forward momentum required to build an empire while raising a daughter alone. "Perfect," the photographer said. "That's the shot." The article came out 2 weeks later. Haewon read it on his phone during Suwa's soccer practice, sitting on the sidelines with the other parents who assumed he was just another successful single parent, not someone whose face was currently on newsstands across the country. The Omega who disrupted childcare. How Haewon built Bondtech from necessity. The piece was flattering, highlighting how Bondtech had grown to serve over 200,000 families across 12 cities. It mentioned his innovative approach to solving real-world problems and his dedication to supporting non-traditional family structures. There was a photo of him in his office, another of the Bondtech team, and a candid shot of him picking up Suwa from preschool, her hand tucked into his. What the article didn't mention, the Bond mark hidden beneath his collar, the sleepless nights when phantom pain woke him gasping, or the fact that he built this empire partly to prove that he was worth more than the alpha who'd discarded him. "Mr. Haewon," Suwa's voice cut through his thoughts. She was running toward him, ponytail bouncing, grass stains on her knees. "Did you see? I almost scored." He scooped her up, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I saw, baby. You were amazing." She beamed, her gray eyes, still painfully familiar after 4 years, crinkling with joy. "Can we get ice cream? We literally had ice cream yesterday. But I almost scored today." Haewon laughed despite himself. "Fine, but only 1 scoop." 2 scoops, she negotiated, because apparently his daughter had inherited more than just Minjun's eyes. She had his business instincts too. 1.5. Deal. Later that evening, after Suwa was asleep in her room cluttered with stuffed animals and picture books, Haewon sat at his kitchen counter reviewing the week's metrics. Bondtech's Series B funding had closed at $45 million. They were expanding to 5 new cities. 2 major publications wanted interviews. His assistant, Mi-sun, had forwarded 17 speaking requests just today. His phone buzzed. A text from Mi-sun, reminder. "Charity gala tomorrow night. Your +1 backed out, but I can find you another date if you want." Several alphas have been asking. Haewon typed back, going solo. "Thanks though." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Mi-sun was too professional to push, but Haewon knew what she thought. 29 years old, successful, objectively attractive according to the magazines that kept featuring him, and perpetually single. She probably assumed he was married to his work, too focused on building Bondtech to make room for romance. She wasn't entirely wrong. What she didn't know, Hayone had tried. Sort of. There was Daniel, an alpha tech investor who'd asked him to dinner after a pitch meeting. They'd gone to a nice restaurant, had engaging conversation about market trends and growth strategies, and Daniel had been respectful when he'd walked Hayone to his car. He'd asked for a second date. Hayone had said yes, but canceled the morning of, claiming a SUA emergency that was only half fabricated. Then there was Juno, an Omega entrepreneur from another startup in his building. Coffee had turned into lunch, had turned into Juno's hand on Hayone's arm, his scent warm and interested. "We should do this again," he'd said, eyes hopeful. Hayone had smiled politely and never followed up. The problem wasn't them. They were kind, successful, attractive. The problem was the bond mark on Hayone's neck that still pulsed with phantom warmth when he was stressed or tired or foolish enough to let his guard down. The problem was that some traitorous part of him was still waiting for an alpha who'd made it crystal clear he wasn't coming back. For years, and Hayone still couldn't bring himself to cover the mark with a tattoo or have it surgically removed like other abandoned Omegas did. It felt like admitting defeat, like erasing the last evidence that Minjun had ever wanted him at all. His therapist, the one Mi-sun didn't know about, had gently suggested he was emotionally unavailable due to unprocessed trauma. Hayone preferred to call it protecting himself from further destruction. The charity gala the next evening was the kind of event Hayone had learned to navigate with practiced ease. Designer suit, confident stride, business cards at the ready. He schmoozed with investors, posed for photos with other honorees, and delivered a short speech about Bondteca's mission that earned enthusiastic applause. "You're inspiring," a young Omega founder told him afterward, eyes bright with admiration. "I'm a single parent too, and seeing what you've built, it gives me hope." Hayone's smile was genuine this time. "You'll do amazing things. I know it." This was why he did it. Not for the Forbes lists or the funding rounds, but for moments like this. Proof that his pain had been transformed into something that helped others. He was fielding questions from a reporter when he felt it. A familiar prickle at the base of his neck, the bond mark suddenly burning hot. His hand flew to his collar instinctively, and he forced himself to breathe through the discomfort. Stress response, his therapist called it. His body's way of manifesting anxiety during high-pressure situations. Except he wasn't anxious. He was fine. Completely fine. The burning intensified. Hayone excused himself and headed toward the bathroom, needing a moment to collect himself. He splashed cold water on his face, avoiding his reflection in the mirror because he knew what he'd see. The same haunted look he'd worn 4 years ago when Minjun's rejection was still fresh. "Get it together," he muttered. "You're not that person anymore." But as he dried his hands and prepared to return to the gala, the bond mark throbbed again. Stronger this time, insistent, like it was trying to tell him something. He ignored it. He'd gotten very good at that over the years. When he returned to the ballroom, Mi-sun was waiting with an urgent expression. "We need to talk," she said. "It's about the Series C funding." "What about it?" "Our lead investor just backed out. But I found a replacement." She hesitated. "It's Kong Enterprises. They're offering $70 million. The name hit him like a physical blow. Hayone's vision tunneled, the gala noise fading to white static. "Kong Enterprises," he repeated slowly. As in the Korean conglomerate, yes. "Their CEO specifically requested a meeting with you next week." Mi-sun was scrolling through her tablet, oblivious to the way Hayone's entire world had just tilted off its axis. "His name is Minjun Kong. Apparently he's been following Bondteca's growth and thinks we're a perfect fit for their portfolio." The bond mark burned white hot. Hayone understood now. It hadn't been stress or anxiety. It had been warning him. After 4 years of silence, of building a life from the wreckage Minjun had left behind, the alpha who'd abandoned him was about to walk back into his carefully constructed world. And this time, Hayone had far more to lose than just his heart. He had SUA. The Monday morning executive meeting started like any other. Coffee that was too weak, Mi-sun's meticulously organized agenda, and Hayone's CFO, Marcus, droning through financial projections with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Hayone was only half listening, his mind still on Sua's request for a pet rabbit that morning. She'd presented her case with PowerPoint slides she'd made herself, complete with a budget breakdown and responsibility chart. For years old and already negotiating like a venture capitalist. He'd have to tell her no. Their apartment barely had room for the two of them, let alone a rabbit. "Which brings us to the Series C funding," Marcus was saying. "I know we've been in talks with Redwood Capital, but they pulled out Friday afternoon." That got Hayone's attention. "They pulled out? Why?" Cold feet about the childcare market. Said it's too volatile post-pandemic. Marcus didn't look concerned. But I've got good news. We have a replacement investor ready to move forward immediately, and their offer is significantly better. How much better? 70 million. Full terms negotiable, but they're committed to the vision and want to fast-track due diligence. Haewon felt the tension in his shoulders ease. 70 million would fund their expansion into 15 new markets, upgrade their platform infrastructure, and give them runway for at least 3 years. It was more than good news, it was game-changing. Who's the investor? He asked. Marcus slid a folder across the conference table. Kong Enterprises. They're a Korean conglomerate with a diverse portfolio: tech, hospitality, real estate. They've been expanding their venture arm into U.S. startups, specifically companies focused on family services and social impact. Haewon's hand froze halfway to the folder. Kong Enterprises. No, it couldn't be. There were probably dozens of companies with that name. Korea wasn't that small. It was a coincidence. Had to be. He opened the folder with hands that wanted to shake but didn't, because he'd learned to control his body even when his mind was screaming. The first page was a standard term sheet, all legal jargon and percentage points. The second page listed the investment team. Lead negotiator, Minjun Kong, CEO. The words swam in front of him. Haewon's vision tunneled, sound fading to a dull roar as his omega biology recognized the threat before his conscious mind fully processed it. His scent spiked, sharp, acrid, the unmistakable smell of distress that no amount of suppressants could fully mask. Haewon, Mi-sun's voice cut through the fog. Are you all right? You just went completely pale. Everyone was staring at him. Marcus, Mi-sun, the head of product, the marketing director, all of them looking concerned because their unflappable CEO had just lost every ounce of color in his face while reading a simple investor brief. Haewon forced his lungs to work, forced his face into a neutral expression that felt like it might crack and reveal the screaming underneath. I'm fine, he said, and his voice came out steady. Professional. A masterclass in lying through sheer force of will. Just surprised by the timeline. 2 weeks is aggressive for due diligence. Marcus nodded, buying it completely. They're motivated. Apparently Minjun Kong himself has been following Bondtech's trajectory. He specifically requested this deal. Of course he did. When's the pitch meeting? Haewon asked, still staring at Minjun's name on the page like it might rearrange itself into something less devastating. Next Friday. Their team is flying in from New York. Marcus pulled up the calendar on his laptop. They want a full presentation, product demo, financials, growth strategy, the works. And they've requested one-on-one time with you specifically to discuss vision alignment. One-on-one time. With Minjun. In the same room. Haewon's bond mark throbbed beneath his collar. That traitorous piece of scar tissue that had never gotten the memo that it was supposed to fade after 4 years of complete abandonment. That works, Haewon heard himself say. Mi-sun, can you coordinate with their assistant on logistics? Already on it, she said, typing rapidly. I'll send over our standard NDA and get the conference room set up. She glanced at him, concern still lingering in her expression. Are you sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. The laugh that escaped Haewon's throat was sharp enough to cut. Perfectly fine. Just another business deal. The meeting continued, but Haewon absorbed none of it. He nodded at appropriate intervals, signed off on decisions he'd probably regret later, and somehow made it to the end without his carefully constructed composure shattering completely. When everyone finally filed out, Mi-sun lingered. Seriously, what's wrong? I've never seen you react like that. Haewon considered telling her. Considered explaining that the investor who wanted to pump $70 million into their company was the same alpha who'd abandoned him pregnant and alone, who'd ghosted every attempt at contact, who'd moved on to elite Manhattan galas while Haewon was giving birth in a hospital room with only Jiho for support. Instead, he said, I'm fine. Just tired. Suwa had me up at 5 a.m. lobbying for a pet rabbit. Mi-sun's expression softened. That kid is going to run a Fortune 500 company someday. God help us all. She laughed and left, mercifully not pushing further. Alone in the conference room, Haewon allowed himself exactly 60 seconds to fall apart. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, and let the panic crash over him in waves. His scent went haywire, distress pheromones flooding the small space until he could barely breathe through the acrid smell of his own fear. For years. He'd had 4 years to build a life, to become someone Minjun wouldn't recognize, to create walls high enough that nothing could hurt him again. And now Minjun was coming here. To his company. The empire Haewon had built from the ashes of their failed bond. Worse, he'd be coming as an investor. Someone Haewon needed. Bondtech's future depended on this funding, and turning down $70 million because of personal history would be professional suicide. His team, his employees, the 200,000 families relying on their platform, they all needed this deal. Which meant Haewon had to sit across from the man who'd destroyed him and pretend to be professional. Pretend the bond mark wasn't screaming. Pretend he wasn't terrified that one look from those gray eyes, the same eyes Suwa had inherited, would undo 4 years of carefully constructed healing. His phone buzzed. A text from Suwa's preschool. Reminder, parent-teacher conference this Thursday at 4 p.m. Haewon stared at the message, then at the folder still open in front of him, Minjun's name glaring up from the page. Suwa, his daughter. The secret that would detonate the moment Minjun saw her, because there was no hiding those eyes, that bone structure, the unmistakable markers of Kong genetics. Haewon had exactly 2 weeks to figure out how to navigate the most important business deal of his career while hiding a 4-year-old daughter from the Alpha, who didn't know she existed. 2 weeks before his carefully separated worlds collided. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Jiho. He's coming to Seattle. Minjun, as an investor, I need you to take Suwa for a week. The response came immediately. Holy shit. Are you okay? Haewon looked around his empty conference room, at the company he'd built from nothing, at the life he'd created that was about to be invaded by the ghost of his past. No, he typed back. But I have to be. Because that was the thing about survival. It didn't care if you were ready. It just demanded you keep moving forward, even when every instinct screamed to run. And Haewon had gotten very, very good at survival, even if it was killing him from the inside out. Haewon arrived at the office 2 hours early on Friday morning, while Seattle was still dark and the streets were empty except for delivery trucks and insomniacs. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind conjured scenarios. Minjun walking in, recognizing him immediately, demanding to know why Haewon had hidden a pregnancy. Or worse, Minjun not recognizing him at all, for years having erased Haewon so completely that even his scent was forgettable. He wasn't sure which possibility terrified him more. In his office, Haewon changed into the suit he'd chosen specifically for today. Charcoal gray, expensive but not ostentatious, tailored to hide the way his hands shook. He applied scent blockers with clinical precision, layering them until his natural pheromones were buried beneath synthetic neutrality. His bond mark he covered with a high collar and concealer, though the damn thing still throbbed like an open wound. Mi-sun found him at 7 a.m., reviewing the presentation for the 14th time. You're going to be brilliant, she said, setting down a cappuccino he wouldn't be able to drink. This pitch is airtight. They'd be idiots not to invest. Haewon nodded, not trusting his voice. The Kong team is scheduled for 9, she continued. 3 executives plus Minjun Kong himself. I've set up the main conference room, and, she paused. Are you sure you're okay? You've been off all week. I'm fine. The lie was getting smoother with repetition. Just want this to go well. By 8:45, the Bondtech team was assembled in the conference room. Marcus, the head of product, the marketing director, and Haewon at the head of the table. His presentation was loaded, water glasses filled, the room temperature calibrated to be comfortable but not sleep-inducing. Everything was perfect. Everything was about to shatter. At 8:58, Mi-sun's voice came through the intercom. They're here. Sending them up now. Haewon's bond mark flared white-hot. He pressed his hand against his collar instinctively, forcing himself to breathe through the pain. Not now. Not when he needed every ounce of control he possessed. Footsteps in the hallway. Professional voices. The door opening. And then Minjun walked into the conference room, and Haewon's entire world tilted sideways. For years hadn't dulled the impact. If anything, Minjun was more devastating now. The boyish softness gone from his face, replaced by sharp angles and an authority that came from running a conglomerate. His suit probably cost more than Haewon's monthly rent used to be. His hair was styled differently, shorter. But his eyes, those gray eyes that Suwa had inherited, were exactly the same. And they were currently locked on Haewon with an expression of absolute shock. Minjun froze 3 steps into the room. His nostrils flared, scent receptors working overtime despite the blockers Haewon had practically bathed in. The Alpha's entire body went rigid, recognition hitting him like a freight train. The other Kong executives filed in behind him, oblivious to the drama unfolding. They introduced themselves with handshakes and business cards. Hae-won operated on autopilot, his mouth forming words while his mind screamed. Hae-won, Min-jun said, and hearing his name in that voice after 4 years of silence was like being gutted. This is your company? Every eye in the room turned to them. Marcus looked confused. Mi-sun's gaze sharpened with sudden understanding. Hae-won met Min-jun's stare with glacial composure he absolutely did not feel. Mr. Kong, he said, voice steady and professional and completely devoid of emotion. Welcome to Bond Tech. I'm the founder and CEO. Shall we begin? He extended his hand for a handshake. A test. A challenge. Min-jun stared at the offered hand like it might burn him, his alpha instincts clearly roaring beneath that expensive suit. Hae-won could see the war happening behind those gray eyes. Confusion, recognition. Something that might have been longing, but was probably just shock. After a beat too long to be comfortable, Min-jun took his hand. The touch was electric. For years of separation, and Hae-won's body still recognized this alpha's skin, still wanted to lean into the warmth of a bond that should have faded to nothing by now. The mark on his neck pulsed so hard he nearly gasped. Min-jun's grip tightened fractionally, his scent spiking despite whatever suppressants he was using. Beneath the synthetic blockers, Hae-won caught a hint of cedar and rain, the pheromone signature that used to mean home, safety, forever. It now meant danger. Hae-won pulled his hand back and gestured to the chairs. Please sit. We have a lot to cover. They sat. The Kong executives on one side of the table, Bond Tech on the other. Min-jun directly across from Hae-won, close enough that even through the scent blockers, their pheromones were trying to reach for each other like phantom limbs. Let's begin with an overview of Bond Tech's mission, Hae-won started, and launched into the presentation he'd practiced until it was muscle memory. He spoke about market gaps and user acquisition, about the 200,000 families they served and the 15 cities they were expanding into. His voice never wavered. His hands, hidden beneath the table, trembled so badly he had to grip his thighs to keep them still. Min-jun didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just stared at Hae-won like he was trying to solve an impossible equation, his alpha instincts clearly in overdrive while his brain struggled to reconcile the omega he'd abandoned with the polished CEO presenting a $70 million pitch. The other executives asked questions. Marcus fielded the financial ones. The product lead demonstrated the platform. Everything proceeded exactly as planned, except for the suffocating tension that made the air feel too thick to breathe. Halfway through, one of Min-jun's executives, a sharp-eyed beta woman named Park, said, "This is impressive work, Mr. Hae-won. What inspired you to focus specifically on single parents?" The question was innocent. Standard due diligence. It still felt like a knife between the ribs. Hae-won's eyes flicked to Min-jun for a fraction of a second. Long enough to see the alpha's jaw clench, long enough for their gazes to lock in a moment of shared, devastating understanding. Personal experience, Hae-won said smoothly. I saw a gap in the market that existing solutions weren't addressing. Sometimes the best innovations come from necessity. Min-jun's hands curled into fists on the table. The presentation continued. Hae-won showed growth projections, user testimonials, competitive analyses. He was flawless. Professional. Every inch the successful CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. Not the shattered Omega who'd sobbed into a hospital pillow while giving birth alone. When he finally concluded, and that's why we believe Kong Enterprises would be the ideal partner for Bond Tech's next phase of growth. The room fell silent. Park consulted with her colleagues in rapid Korean. Marcus shot Hae-won a concerned look. Mi-sun was watching the interaction between Hae-won and Min-jun with the expression of someone who'd just solved a mystery she hadn't known existed. Min-jun finally spoke. Could I have a moment alone with Mr. Hae-won? To discuss vision alignment. It wasn't a request. Hae-won's team looked at him. He nodded, maintaining that glacial mask even though his heart was trying to beat out of his chest. Of course. Everyone, let's take 15. The room emptied. Marcus hesitated at the door, clearly sensing something wrong, but Hae-won gave him a look that said I've got this even though he absolutely did not have this. The door closed. Silence flooded the space, heavy and suffocating. Min-jun stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He started pacing, running his hands through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Hae-won's chest ache. The alpha scent was spiking now, pheromones breaking through his suppressants in waves, confusion, distress, and something else Hae-won refused to name. Hae-won, Min-jun said, and his voice cracked on the name. What? How? You're in Seattle? Yes. You built this company? Yes. When? Min-jun stopped pacing, facing him. I tried to find you. After I came back from New York, I went to the apartment and you were gone. Your job said you'd resigned. Jiho wouldn't tell me anything. You just vanished. Haewon laughed, and it was a bitter, broken sound. I vanished? That's rich, coming from the alpha who blocked every possible way for me to contact him. I never. Minjun's expression shifted to confusion. What are you talking about? The emails that bounced. The calls that went to voicemail. Your family's staff telling me you weren't accepting contact. The photos of you at matching galas in Manhattan. Haewon stood, channeling 4 years of rage into ice-cold fury. Don't pretend you didn't orchestrate it perfectly. I don't know what you're. Minjun stopped. Something flickered across his face. My mother. What? My mother. His voice was hollow. She changed my email. Forwarded my calls. She must have. He looked at Haewon with dawning horror. What did you need to tell me? What was so urgent? And there it was. The moment of truth. Haewon could tell him about Suah. Could watch Minjun's world implode the way his had 4 years ago. Instead, he said, it doesn't matter anymore. That was a different life. He moved toward the door. Your team is waiting. Do we have a deal or not? Haewon, do we have a deal, Mr. Kong? Minjun stared at him, those gray eyes full of questions Haewon would never answer. Yes, he finally said. We have a deal. Haewon nodded once and opened the door, letting his team file back in to finalize the terms of a partnership that would force him to work alongside the alpha who'd destroyed him. The presentation had been flawless. His heart was in pieces. And somewhere across town, Suah was asking Jiho when her mama would pick her up, completely unaware that her father, the one she'd never met, was $70 million closer to discovering she existed. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and tell me where you're watching from. Saturday morning at Discovery Park was Haewon and Suah's sacred ritual. Had been since they'd moved to Seattle 4 years ago. They always followed the same route. The loop trail that wound through forest and meadow, ending at the lighthouse where Suah would collect rocks she deemed special, based on criteria only she understood. Then hot chocolate from the cafe near the parking lot, where she'd chatter about preschool drama with the intensity of someone negotiating international treaties. Today, Haewon needed it more than ever. 5 days since the pitch meeting. 5 days of Minjun's team conducting due diligence, requesting documents, scheduling follow-up calls. 5 days of Haewon jumping every time his phone rang, terrified it would be Minjun demanding answers to questions he'd somehow figured out to ask. Mama, you're not listening, Suah said, tugging his hand. Sorry, baby. What did you say? I said Ms. Park told us about butterflies yesterday. Did you know they taste with their feet? Her gray eyes, Minjun's eyes, always Minjun's eyes, were wide with wonder. That's so weird. What if we tasted with our feet? What if, oh, Mama, look. She pointed at a monarch butterfly drifting lazily across the trail, its orange wings brilliant against the morning sun. It's beautiful, Haewon agreed, pulling out his phone to take a photo. Suah insisted on documenting every butterfly sighting in what she called her nature journal, which was mostly crayon drawings and enthusiastic misspellings. The butterfly floated higher, dancing just out of reach. Suah watched it with the single-minded focus of a 4-year-old who'd decided this particular butterfly was going to be her new best friend. Can I follow it? She asked. Just a little bit? Stay where I can see you, Haewon said, distracted by a text from Marcus about Monday's board meeting. Suah nodded and took off after the butterfly, her light-up sneakers flashing with each step. Haewon typed a response to Marcus, half watching his daughter chase the butterfly across the meadow. The park was relatively empty this early, just a few joggers, a couple walking their dog, and his phone buzzed again. Me son, with a question about the investor contract. Haewon pulled up the document, scrolling through the terms they'd negotiated. Everything looked good. Better than good. Kong Enterprises was offering exactly what Bond Tech needed, with minimal strings attached. It was the deal of a lifetime. It was also slowly killing him, knowing he'd be tied to Minjun professionally for the next 5 years minimum. Movement in his peripheral vision. Suah, further away than she should be, still chasing that damn butterfly. Suah, not too far, he called. She waved without looking back, completely focused on her winged prey. The butterfly drifted toward the parking lot, toward the road that ran along the park's edge. Haewon's attention snapped up from his phone. Suah, stop! But she was 4 and determined and completely oblivious to danger. The butterfly was the only thing that mattered, and it was floating across the bike path now, heading toward. A cyclist came around the bend. Fast. Too fast. headphones in, head down, racing along the path like they were training for something. And Suah, his baby, his entire world, ran directly into their path. Haewon's scream caught in his throat. Too far away. He'd never reach her in time. He was running anyway, legs pumping, but the distance was too great, and the cyclist was too close, and someone else was running. A man in athletic gear appeared from the trail to the left, moving with inhuman speed. Alpha reflexes, Haewon's brain supplied distantly. Alphas moved faster when their instincts kicked in. The alpha reached Suah a split second before the cyclist would have hit her. He swept her up in one smooth motion, twisting his body to take the impact as the cyclist clipped his shoulder. They went down together in a controlled fall, the alpha curling around Suah protectively as they hit the grass. The cyclist yelled something, brakes screeching. Haewon was still running, his heart a drum against his ribs, terror making his vision white at the edges. He reached them as the alpha was sitting up, still holding Suah against his chest. The man was breathing hard, his scent spiking with adrenaline and Haewon stopped dead. No. No, no, no. Minjun looked up, and their eyes locked. For a frozen moment, neither of them moved. Minjun's face cycled through recognition, shock, and then confusion as he looked down at the child in his arms. At Suah, who was crying now, scared but unhurt, her small hands fisted in his shirt. "Mama," she sobbed, reaching for Haewon. Haewon moved on instinct, kneeling beside them and pulling Suah from Minjun's arms. He ran his hands over her frantically, checking for injuries, his omega biology screaming at the near miss. "I'm okay," Suah hiccuped. "The man caught me. I'm okay, Mama." You can't run into the bike path, baby. You scared me so much." Haewon's voice was shaking. His whole body was shaking. The cyclist was apologizing profusely, asking if everyone was all right. Haewon heard himself say yes, heard himself accept the apology, heard the cyclist leave. All of it happened at a distance, because his entire focus was on the alpha still kneeling in the grass, staring at Suah like he'd seen a ghost. Minjun's nostrils flared. His eyes, wide with shock, tracked over Suah's features with the systematic precision of someone cataloging evidence. The shape of her face, the arch of her eyebrows, the distinctive gray of her eyes that matched his exactly. His scent exploded. Not the controlled, professional pheromones from the boardroom, but raw alpha instinct. Mine, pup, mine. "How old is she?" Minjun's voice was hoarse. Haewon stood, pulling Suah up with him. "Thank you for your help. We should go." "How old?" Minjun rose too, and he was taller than Haewon remembered, more solid. His alpha presence filled the space between them, demanding answers. "Haewon, how old is she?" Suah, oblivious to the tension, turned in Haewon's arms to look at her rescuer. She studied Minjun with the unnerving directness of small children, her head tilting. "I'm 4, she announced. "I'll be 5 in February. Are you okay? You fell down too." Minjun's face went white. His lips moved, doing math that Haewon could see happening in real time. 4 years old. Born in February. 9 months before that would be. "May," Minjun whispered. She was conceived in May. Their anniversary. The night Minjun had walked out. "We need to go," Haewon said again, turning away. Minjun's hand shot out, catching his arm. Not hard, but firm. An alpha who'd just realized his entire world had shifted. "Haewon. Is she?" His voice cracked. "Is she mine? Don't." Haewon's voice was ice over molten rage. "Don't you dare. I have a right to know. You had a right to know 4 years ago, when I was trying to reach you. When I was pregnant and alone and being told by your family's staff that you weren't accepting contact. When I saw photos of you at matching galas in New York, moving on like I'd never existed." Haewon's hands tightened on Suah. "You gave up your rights the day you walked out." Suah was looking between them, her gray eyes worried. "Mama, why are you upset?" Haewon forced his scent to calm, his voice to gentle. "I'm okay, baby. Let's go get that hot chocolate, okay? But the nice man. Say thank you to the nice man." "Thank you for catching me," Suah said obediently, giving Minjun a gap-toothed smile that probably looked heartbreakingly familiar to the alpha who'd just realized he had a daughter. Minjun made a sound like he'd been punched. His scent was chaos, shock, grief, longing, and a possessive alpha instinct that made Haewon's omega biology want to submit, to present his pup for inspection by her sire. He ignored every instinct and started walking. "Haewon, wait. Stay away from us," Haewon said without turning around. "You're my investor, nothing more. We'll communicate through our teams." "She's my daughter." Haewon stopped, turned, met those gray eyes with 4 years of accumulated pain. "She's my daughter." Mine. I carried her. I gave birth to her alone. I've raised her, loved her, built a life for her. You're just the alpha who happened to provide DNA before he disappeared. I didn't know. Because you made it impossible for me to tell you. Haewon's voice cracked, and Suwa whimpered against his chest. He lowered his voice, forcing calm. You don't get to be the victim here. You don't get to show up 4 years later and claim rights you abandoned. Minjun looked gutted. Lost. His alpha instincts were clearly screaming at him to fight, to claim, to demand access to his pup. But even he could see that Haewon was a hair's breadth from shattering. Please, Minjun said, and the word sounded like it cost him everything. Please, just can we talk? Not here. Not now. But soon. No. Haewon. Mama, Suwa said softly. You're squishing me. Haewon immediately loosened his grip, pressing a kiss to her hair. Sorry, baby. When he looked up, Minjun was staring at them with such naked longing it was almost obscene. The alpha scent of a parent recognizing their child, biological imperative meeting reality 4 years too late. I'll find you, Minjun said quietly. We're not done. Yes, Haewon said. We are. He walked away, his daughter in his arms, and didn't look back even though he could feel Minjun's gaze burning into his spine. Behind them, an alpha stood in the grass and realized he'd just met the child he never knew existed. Ahead of them, an omega walked toward an uncertain future where his carefully guarded secret had just been irrevocably exposed. And between them, a 4-year-old girl with gray eyes asked, Mama, why did that man smell like home? Haewon made it exactly 30 feet before Minjun caught up to them. Wait. The alpha's hand landed on his shoulder, and Haewon spun so fast that Suwa let out a startled squeak. Do not touch me, Haewon hissed, his omega biology torn between submission to an alpha's authority and the primal need to protect his child from a threat. Right now, Minjun felt like both. Minjun's hand dropped immediately, but he didn't back away. He was breathing hard, his scent wild and uncontrolled. Cedar and rain mixed with the sharp ozone smell of an alpha in emotional distress. His eyes were locked on Suwa with an intensity that made Haewon want to run. I need to know, Minjun said, his voice raw. I need you to say it. Mama, I want down, Suwa whispered. She was getting heavy, and Haewon's arms were shaking from adrenaline and fear and the bone-deep exhaustion of keeping this secret for 4 years only to have it exposed in a park on a Saturday morning. He set her down but kept her hand firmly in his. Stay right here, baby. Right next to Mama. Suwa nodded, her gray eyes flicking between the two adults with the perceptiveness of children who knew when something was very wrong. The parking lot was mostly empty. A few scattered cars, a couple loading gear into their trunk, oblivious to the drama unfolding 30 yards away. Haewon wished desperately that they were somewhere more public, somewhere Minjun couldn't corner him like this. How old is she? Minjun asked again, his voice controlled now. Too controlled. The kind of control that came before an alpha lost it completely. 4. When's her birthday? Haewon's jaw clenched. He could lie. Should lie. But what was the point now? Minjun had already done the math, had already scented his own pheromone signature on Sua's skin. Alphas knew their offspring on an instinctive level, and the way Minjun was looking at her, like she'd rearranged his entire universe, left no room for doubt. February 14th, Haewon said flatly. Minjun's face crumpled. Valentine's Day. How poetic. That means you were, Minjun's voice cracked. He pressed his hand to his chest like his bond mark was burning the same way Haewon's was. You were pregnant. When you were trying to reach me. You were pregnant. Yes. For how long? When did you find out? 2 weeks after you left. Haewon's voice was emotionless, reciting facts like they didn't still wake him up at night. 6 weeks along. I tried to tell you. I never, Minjun's hands clenched into fists. I never got any messages. Nothing. If you'd told me. I tried. The words exploded out of Haewon before he could stop them. Suwa flinched, and he immediately lowered his voice, running his free hand through his hair. I tried everything. Calls, emails, messages. I went to your office. I contacted your family. Every single attempt hit a wall. My mother, Minjun said, and there was murder in his voice. She must have. When I came back from New York, she told me you'd moved on. That you'd left because you realized the bond wasn't working. I tried to find you, but you'd disappeared. Haewon laughed, bitter and sharp. I disappeared? You're the one who went to Manhattan and played Happy Bachelor at matching galas while I was giving birth alone in a Seattle hospital. What are you? I never went to matching galas. There were photos. Articles. You with your mother. being introduced to suitable omegas from powerful families. Haewon's voice dripped with venom. Song Eugene. Park Ji-woo. Kim Seo-yeon. Should I keep going? Or do you need help remembering the omegas you were courting while I was pregnant with your child? Minjun's face went sheet white. Those weren't, my mother organized those. I was there for business, and he stopped, rage and realization dawning. She orchestrated all of it. The emails, the calls, the events. She wanted us separated. Well, congratulations to her. It worked. Haewon, I swear I didn't know. If I'd known you were pregnant. You what? Haewon's fury finally broke free, for years of suppressed rage pouring out like poison. You would have come back? You would have chosen me over your family's empire? Don't insult my intelligence. Yes, Minjun shouted, and Suwa pressed closer to Haewon's leg. The alpha immediately lowered his voice, his alpha instincts clearly warring with his need to keep his newly discovered daughter comfortable. Yes, I would have. You think I wanted to leave? You think walking away from our bond didn't nearly kill me? You said it was fading. You said you didn't feel it anymore. I lied. Minjun's voice broke. My mother convinced me. She showed me fake evidence that you were seeing someone else. Messages that looked like they came from your phone. Photos that were photoshopped. She said our bond was toxic, that you were using me, that I needed to protect the family legacy. He laughed, hollow and devastating. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. And I thought leaving you was the right thing to do. Haewon stared at him, his mind reeling. So what? You expect me to forgive you because you were manipulated? You still chose to believe her over me. You still left on our anniversary without even giving me a chance to defend myself. I know. Minjun's voice was wrecked. I know, and I've regretted it every single day since. The bond never faded, Haewon. It's still there. I still feel you. Don't. Haewon's voice was ice. Don't you dare try to use our bond to manipulate me now. I'm not. Minjun ran his hands through his hair, frustration and grief written across his face. I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to. His eyes dropped to Suwa, who was watching the exchange with wide, uncertain eyes. I have a daughter. No, Haewon said firmly. I have a daughter. You have a biological connection to a child you've never met. That's not fair. Fair. Haewon's laugh was ugly. You want to talk about fair? I was pregnant and terrified, trying to reach the father of my child while he ignored every attempt at contact. I went through morning sickness alone, through complications that could have killed us both. I gave birth in a hospital room with only my best friend present because the alpha who was supposed to be there chose his family's approval over our bond. His voice rose despite his best efforts. I've been a single parent for 4 years. For years of late nights and daycare pickups, and trying to build a company while raising a child alone. So don't you dare talk to me about fair. Minjun looked gutted. You were in danger? The pregnancy had complications. Bond separation syndrome. My body was failing because my alpha had abandoned me. Haewon's hand went to his bond mark reflexively. The doctors said I needed alpha pheromones to stabilize, but the only alpha I was bonded to had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. I didn't know. Minjun's voice was barely a whisper. Haewon, I swear on everything I am, I didn't know. Mama, Suwa tugged on his hand. Why is the nice man crying? Haewon looked at Minjun and saw tears tracking down the alpha's face. Saw the devastation of a man realizing he'd missed 4 years of his daughter's life. Saw grief and rage and regret warring for dominance. He felt nothing, or tried to feel nothing. The part of him that had loved this alpha was buried under 4 years of survival. We're leaving, Haewon said. Please. Minjun's voice cracked. Please, just can I know her name? Haewon hesitated. Giving Minjun her name felt like giving him power, like acknowledging his claim to a child he'd never held as a newborn, never rocked to sleep, never comforted through nightmares. But Suwa was looking up at him with those gray eyes, and she deserved to make her own choices someday about the alpha who'd contributed half her DNA. Suwa, he finally said. Her name is Suwa. Minjun's breath hitched. Beautiful beginning. Yes. It's perfect. Minjun crouched down, bringing himself to Suwa's eye level, but keeping a respectful distance. Hi, Suwa. He glanced at Haewon, clearly uncertain what to call himself. He's nobody, Haewon said coldly. Say goodbye, Suwa. We're going home. But Mama. Now. Suwa's lower lip trembled. She didn't understand why her usually gentle Mama was being so harsh, why the man who'd saved her was crying, why the air smelled like sadness and anger. Minjun stood slowly. I'm not going to disappear, Haewon. Not again. She's my daughter, and I You left. Haewon cut him off. You blocked me. You chose your family over our bond. You let your mother manipulate you instead of fighting for what we had. I stopped being your problem the day you walked out of our apartment. He picked up Suah, ignoring her protest. And she was never your problem at all, because you didn't even know she existed. She's not a problem, she's mine. Haewon's voice was final. You want to be in her life? Get a lawyer. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. You don't get to swoop in 4 years later and play daddy because your guilt finally caught up with you. He walked to his car, Suah in his arms, and didn't look back. Behind him, Minjun stood in the parking lot, watching his Omega and his daughter drive away, the truth finally complete and devastating. He was a father, and he'd missed everything. Haewon made it to his car before his hands started shaking so badly he couldn't get the key fob to work. 3 attempts. 4. The car finally beeped, and he fumbled with Suah's car seat straps, his vision blurring at the edges. He needed to get her buckled. Needed to get them out of here before Minjun followed, before this entire situation spiraled further out of control. Mama, you're doing it wrong, Suah said, her voice small. The strap is twisted. Haewon looked down and saw she was right. His hands were shaking so badly, he couldn't even buckle his daughter into her car seat properly. For years of doing this every single day, and now he couldn't manage the simple mechanics because Minjun was 30 feet away and his entire carefully constructed life was collapsing. Sorry, baby, he managed, untwisting the strap. There. All better. He was about to close her door when Suah's hand shot out, catching his wrist. Wait. What's wrong? She was looking past him, toward the parking lot where Minjun still stood, frozen and devastated. Suah's gray eyes, those damned gray eyes that had given everything away, were fixed on the Alpha with an intensity that made Haewon's stomach drop. I need to ask him something, she said. Suah, no. We need to go. But she was already unbuckling herself with the determination of a 4-year-old who'd made up her mind. She slipped past Haewon before he could stop her, her light-up sneakers flashing as she ran back across the parking lot. Suah! Haewon's heart lurched. He ran after her, but she was fast and single-minded, and she reached Minjun before Haewon could catch her. She stopped directly in front of the Alpha and tilted her head back to look at him, her small hand reaching out to tug on his sleeve. Minjun looked down at her with an expression of such raw wonder that Haewon's chest ached despite everything. The Alpha crouched immediately, bringing himself to her level, his entire body language shifting to something gentle and non-threatening. Hi, Minjun said softly, his voice wrecked but controlled. Did you forget something? Suah studied him with the unnerving directness of small children who hadn't yet learned that staring was rude. She looked at his face, tracing the angles with her eyes. Looked at the way his hair fell across his forehead. Looked at his hands, which were trembling slightly where they rested on his knees. Then she did something that made both adults freeze. She leaned forward and sniffed. It was a distinctly Omega behavior. Using scent to gather information, to verify identity, to understand the world in ways that went beyond sight and sound. Suah had never done it before, had never shown any Omega characteristics because she was too young for her secondary gender to present. But she was doing it now, her small nose nearly touching Minjun's shirt as she breathed in his scent signature. Minjun went completely still, his Alpha instincts clearly recognizing the significance of the gesture, even as confusion flickered across his face. Haewon reached them, breathing hard. Suah, we need to. You smell like home, Suah interrupted, still staring at Minjun. Like the Alpha in my dreams. The world tilted sideways. What? Haewon's voice came out strangled. Suah turned to look at him, her expression serious in the way only small children could be when discussing things adults didn't understand. I have dreams sometimes. About an Alpha who smells like rain and trees. He's always far away, and I can't see his face, but I know he's important. She looked back at Minjun. You smell exactly like him. Minjun made a sound like he'd been punched. His scent exploded, raw Alpha pheromones mixing with grief and wonder and a possessive instinct that made Haewon's Omega biology want to submit. That's not possible, Haewon said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're too young to sense. Mama says I'm special, Suah continued, oblivious to the emotional carnage she was creating. Because I can sense my Alpha parent even though we've never met. She says some pups can do that, especially when the bond is really strong. She tugged Minjun's sleeve again. Are you my daddy? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Haewon's carefully constructed walls, For years of protection, of keeping this secret, of building a life where Minjun didn't exist, shattered completely. He'd never told Suwa about her father. Had deflected every question with vague explanations about donors and different kinds of families. Had certainly never said anything about alpha parents or bonds or dreams. But Suwa was right. Some pups could sense their absent parent through the bond, especially in Omegaverse families where genetic connections ran deeper than simple biology. Haewon had dismissed it as folklore, as wishful thinking from abandoned Omegas trying to give their children hope. He'd never considered it might be real. Minjun was staring at Suwa with tears streaming down his face, his entire body shaking. His voice broke. He looked at Haewon, desperate and lost. Is it okay if I? Haewon didn't trust himself to speak. Didn't trust himself to do anything except watch as his daughter, his brilliant, intuitive, impossibly perceptive daughter, destroyed the last of his defenses. Minjun turned back to Suwa, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Yes, he whispered. I'm your daddy. Suwa nodded like this confirmed something she'd already known. I thought so. You have my eyes. Minjun choked on a laugh that was half sob. You have my eyes, baby girl. And your mama's smile. And, he stopped, pressing his hand to his chest. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I didn't know about you, but that's not an excuse. I should have fought harder to find your mama. I should have. It's okay, Suwa said with the easy forgiveness of children who hadn't yet learned about grudges. You're here now. Suwa, Haewon finally found his voice. Come here, please. She looked at him, then at Minjun, clearly torn. But I just found my daddy. I know, baby. But we need to talk about this. Just you and me first, okay? But, Suwa. Haewon used his firm voice, the one that meant no arguments. Now, she sighed with the drama only a 4-year-old could muster, then looked at Minjun. Will you be here tomorrow? Minjun glanced at Haewon, clearly asking permission. Haewon wanted to say no. Wanted to grab his daughter and run, to put distance between them and this alpha who'd already destroyed him once. But Suwa was looking at him with those gray eyes full of hope, and Minjun was looking at him with the expression of a man who'd just found something he didn't know he'd lost. And Haewon's bond mark was burning so hot he could barely breathe, responding to Minjun's presence after 4 years of aching silence. We'll talk, Haewon said finally. Later. After I've had time to, he couldn't finish. Couldn't articulate the chaos of emotions threatening to drown him. Tomorrow, Minjun said. It wasn't a question. Please, Haewon. I know I have no right to ask, but please. Let me try to fix this. You can't fix 4 years. No, Minjun agreed. But maybe I can be there for the next 4. And the 4 after that. And every day after for the rest of my life, if you'll let me. Haewon's breath caught. The bond mark pulsed, that traitorous piece of scar tissue that had never stopped reaching for its mate. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know if I can trust you not to destroy us again. Then let me prove it. Minjun's voice was fierce, determined. Let me prove that I'm not the coward who walked away. Let me prove that I'm the alpha our daughter deserves. Our daughter. The words hit Haewon like a tidal wave. For 4 years, it had been his daughter. His responsibility, his joy, his world. Sharing that felt like opening himself up to another betrayal. But Suwa was looking between them with hope written across her face, and Minjun was looking at him like Haewon still held his entire world in his hands. And deep in his chest, where the bond mark lived, something that had been frozen for 4 years started to thaw. Tomorrow, Haewon said quietly. My office. 2 p.m. We'll talk about custody arrangements. Minjun's face transformed with hope. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Haewon scooped up Suwa, who went willingly this time. You have a lot to prove, Minjun. And if you hurt her, if you make promises you can't keep. I won't, Minjun said fiercely. Never again. Haewon nodded once and carried Suwa back to the car. This time, his hands were steady enough to buckle her in properly. As they drove away, Suwa pressed her face to the window, waving at the alpha who stood watching them leave. Mama, she said softly. Yeah, baby? Are you mad at me for asking? Haewon's heart broke a little. No, sweetheart. I'm not mad at you. You did nothing wrong. Then why are you crying? He reached back and squeezed her small hand. Sometimes adults cry when they're happy and sad at the same time. Are you happy sad about my daddy? Haewon looked in the rearview mirror at his daughter, their daughter, and tried to find an honest answer. I don't know yet, he finally said. But we're going to figure it out together, okay? Okay, Mama. In the parking lot behind them, Minjun stood until the car disappeared from view, His hand pressed against his chest where the bond mark he thought had died was burning back to life. He had a daughter. He had an Omega who hated him. And he had one chance, just one, to prove he deserved them both.